is we're going to press, or well, first we're going to fold this, the facing part of the band on the inside of the skirt. We're going to fold it down at the fold line, and you're going to turn this under so that it just barely goes over your stitching. Okay, so let's press that first. Okay, that is 1.25 inches here. It's a tiny bit more, but like a 32nd of an inch. Okay, so now I've got this folded good. So now I can go back, and I'm gonna, right here, if we look at your instructions, when it says to fold it under, it says fold it under so that it barely covers the waistband seam. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and do that. So I'm gonna come over here now, and I'm gonna cover that waistband seam just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna repress it. Okay, and once I do that, and I've got to trim this corner. I've got to trim it out still. So, but I'm just going to go ahead and press it, and then I'll come back and trim. Okay, so now I've got this trimmed to where this will be caught. Okay. All right. So, trim the rest of the waistband. Okay. Again, just so it just kind of barely goes over top of that fold. So again, when you stitch in the ditch, you're going to need a little bit more than if you just edge stitch. But the sample says to turn it all the same. So for that reason, just go down. Just make sure that this edge is a little bit below. Okay, I'm going to bring that out a little bit. Okay, so then after you finish doing that, press it good, open it back up, and trim that folded edge down to 3/8. So that's where I'm going to fold this up and make sure that this is trimmed to 3/8. Okay, and I'm going to trim a little bit off. Okay, so that I've got 3/8 here. And that looks pretty good. I've got a little bit less than 3/8, but that's because I have all this fluffy stuff, the frayed edge. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this. Okay, now the other thing is we've also got to trim this side. Okay, so I will do some trimming, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so one thing, we need to make sure that we trim not only the facing where we fold it under, but we need to also trim the skirt seam allowance. And so make sure that you trim this, and this can actually be done earlier than this step, but go ahead and because I haven't trimmed it yet, I'm gonna trim it right now. So I'm gonna trim the actual skirt. I'm gonna trim the skirt to 1/4. And I'm going to trim the band to 3/8 because the widest to the world. So that means that the band should be trimmed to 3/8. Okay. So I trimmed this one at 1/4. I'm just going to go back and make sure that's good. And then I'll trim this one at a little bit wider than that. So 3/8. Okay, so I'm kind of doing them together. I'm trimming the one, and then I'm going back and trimming the other. But so make sure you trim that to 1/4. Trim this one to 3/8. Okay, and I'm almost finished that part. Okay, and then once I get that done, then I'll trim my facing down a little bit. But because I needed a little bit more for the turn of cloth, I'm actually not trimming off as much as I would need if it was a little bit lighter weight fabric. Okay, and then I'm also going to trim the corners here. And here's a corner to trim. Okay, so now I'll go to this side, which is the facing side, and trim that to about 3/8. So almost, I actually only turned it under like a 1/2 inch, so I'm not trimming off quite as much. And because it had quite a bit of fray on this edge, this is actually the selvage. It had some frayed edges. I'm actually just pretty much taking off all that fray stuff. Okay, we're almost done. Okay. All right, so now